how do we as human beings cope with that change? I mean, people don't like to change their breakfast cereal.
Right.
Much less their entire way of operating. I don't run the brush through her hair like all of it at once. You can't do that. You have to take it section by section. And because of healthcare, I think it's a great analogy to healthcare. It is very complex. It is full of all different kinds of interconnected systems. And so we have to take it one tangle at a time.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the System Logic Podcast. I'm Jason Lee. I am thrilled to be talking today with our guest, Allison Pullins. We are prepping for our very first season and excited to learn a little bit more about Allison and also get her perspective on folks like you out there in the audience and what you all might be looking for in a great conversation like what we're having today. Let me just start off by saying, Allison, thank you for joining us today. Allison is a leader, just like you all out there, who sits at the intersection of healthcare administration and technology. She has spent her entire career, decades, in the healthcare industry and was most recently the vice president of product at ECG Technology Division. And prior to that was the chief strategy officer at MD Ranger, which is another healthcare technology company focused on medical groups and physicians. And so Allison is here to give us a little bit of a logic lab lesson on whether or not we're truly hitting the mark here with our thoughts and our content at System Logic, but also really start to tease out how the C-suite members of the audience out there are thinking about the industry, what keeps them up at night. So, Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm grateful to be here today.
Fantastic. I have to apologize ahead of time. A little bit froggy today. Got a touch of the allergies, but we'll soldier through it.
Yes, we will. I live in North Carolina, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm currently in a cloud of tree pollen. So, feeling ya, Jason.
Yeah, that dogwood in the southeast there. Well, let's give everybody in the audience just a little bit of a background on yourself, Allison. I highlighted some of the platitudes. Walk us through a couple of the highlights from your career. What are you most proud of in your successes, and how do you look back on the last several years of what you've been accomplishing?
I would describe myself as a healthcare technologist with a focus and passion for leadership. I have spent the past 2 to 3 years transitioning our company, which we sold to ECG Management Consultants about 2.5 years ago. When that acquisition happened, ECG was our first technology acquisition. And so we helped establish their digital solution service line. It was a tremendous privilege to be at the ground floor of that. Not only did we integrate MD Ranger, which, as you mentioned, is a physician compliance product. It helps healthcare organizations determine and document fair and compliant physician compensation. We also built from 0 to 1 an entirely new automated fair market value opinion product.
Wow, fantastic.
We launched a patient access dashboard to the market. And when I left, I was working on go-to-market for the Cypher Collective, which is a group of AI-powered technologies tailored for, I think, the fundamental problems that hospital administrators are facing today. So the past couple of years, obviously at a macro level, have been full of technology disruption, and it was so great to be, really on the ground floor of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to touch on AI a little bit later as well, but all of those areas I'm hearing out there from a lot of the folks that I talk to, big challenges in the marketplace. You've dedicated a lot of years to that interesting place of the intersection of technology and healthcare today. As you look back and are thinking about some wisdom that you might share with a lot of our listeners who are in the similar seats, right? They work for medical groups, they work for maybe even health plans that are associated with medical groups and physicians, or they work for smaller groups out there that are serving, or smaller companies that are serving some of those medical groups. What advice would you have for them as they're thinking about, like, boy, I got all these challenges. I work with these smart people, the physicians, there's technologists out there, there's health system leadership. How do you navigate some of those various constituents and key stakeholders?
What a big question. I have looked at my own professional career with a growth mindset approach. And quite frankly, it's more of a lifestyle practice. Every day when I wake up, I make the choice to show up and be accountable for what I do during my day and the decisions that I make. And I think that's how we should all, whether we are administrators or whether we are just starting our careers, we all need to simply show up and be there and be present for the challenges that we will face because there will be many.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, so as you mentioned, the what we think of at System Logic of the various components and parts of the industry that are going through a lot of change right now. It's my stance that the heart of administration and really the core of what we do is the back office, right? The back office will help the flow of patients, will help the performance of the medical groups, allow the physicians to do great work. How do you, when you hear that, does that resonate with you as an executive, both in your experience as well as the organizations that you've worked with, that the back office really should be front and center? I might posit.
100%, Jason. I couldn't agree more. And I think it is so curious that we still use the term back office because they certainly aren't physically in the back anymore. Oftentimes they have entire floors, if not buildings, dedicated to these essential functions, right? And so
Right.
it makes me wonder, is that term signaling that perhaps in organizations we are deprioritizing these functions or these people?
Fair question.
Placing less value on them? And so I challenge us. Sometimes the truth can be hidden in plain sight by the way we describe things, right? And so
Right. Yeah,
I kind
yeah.
of challenge us to say, these functions are truly the heart, the cardiovascular system. If we want to take this analogy into the human body even further, they are the vasculature of entire organizations. They connect everything. They bring the systems to life, right? And so these folks and these functions should absolutely be prioritized. Furthermore, let me say, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, I think these functions, these administrative functions, are the ones that bear the brunt of dysfunction at organizations.
Right.
They are the first to feel pressure on margins. They are the first to feel probably not the best leadership decisions. They're the ones that get the impact first. And so it resonates so much with me when you say this.
Well, I would say that, yes, there has been a lot of operational scrutiny on some of those divisions, and they are bearing quite a bit of brunt. That has, in my mind, started to transition, I think, as evidenced by all the different professional organizations out there and a lot of brain power and technology going into a part of the industry like revenue cycle where they're trying to make that as efficient as possible. Now, there's a lot of debate out there about whether or not battling the AI bots on the health plan side is good for the industry. But that in and of itself is an example where I think part of what you're getting at has started to be addressed. Can we optimize the workflow? Can we use technology to ease the burden on the people that are functioning in that area? And then more recently, and I think you alluded to this a little bit in your introduction, more recently, the scrutiny around access, right? Can we get the patients to the care that they need has raised that spotlight and shown it on an area that needs some additional work. Do you think that that's more so a cynical approach at increasing productivity of physicians, if you will, or do you think it's more around trying to improve access, trying to actually improve the care for patients?
Porque no los dos, as they
Right.
say.
Yes,
And
exactly.
after being in healthcare for 20 years, am I a bit cynical? You betcha. I also, though, am a very mission-driven and oriented person. And I think people don't go into healthcare for the big bucks. Like, let's be real. People go into healthcare because, well, 80% of us, 90% of us go into healthcare because we want to make an impact. We
Right.
want our lives to matter through serving others. And so I think there is an access component to this, but I also think there is very much, business decisions that are driving these efficiencies. I also want to say, to your comments about rev cycle, As I said before, I'm a technologist. I believe in technology. You know this about me, Jason. Like, I am an early adopter, all the things. Yet, you can't just add technology into an organization ultimately run by humans and think that is going to solve some workflow problem if you don't fundamentally address human issues of being led in a values driven way, having clear priorities, and being communicated to in a thoughtful way. Like, if people are given, if people understand how they are supposed to do their jobs and have a clear directive and have the autonomy to do their jobs, then the technology will enhance it and make
Right.
people's lives better. But if there is fundamental brokenness within the human teams and the human systems, technology may actually make it worse.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. It sounds like you're giving a little bit of a system playbook to some of the leaders out there. I was curious some of your perspectives on today. Everything, the lips on every person is AI, 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 right? How do we use AI to change some of these processes, improve some of these processes? I touched on it a little bit earlier as it relates to revenue cycle, but agentic AI specifically is an area that a lot of brain power and investment is going into. So as you think about that, right, and the general focus in the whole country and then specifically in healthcare around AI, I know that there's an operational application, there's probably some clinical applications of AI, but it's coming fast, right? Everybody out there, we're not going to be able to avoid this as a tool. How do we navigate that? What advice? And it sounds like you were starting to give some advice to some of those leaders out there. But how do leaders fold this into their process? How do they help people that have been locked into a given process for years, if not decades, feel comfortable with this? What's some thoughts that you've had as you hear more and more about these technologies?
I've been thinking about this a lot. And in an environment of disruptive and change, I mean, you said it yourself, it's moving so quickly. How do we as human beings cope with that change? I mean, people don't like to change their breakfast cereal,
Right.
much less their entire way of operating at work.
I'm a simple cornflakes guy myself. I don't go for that sugary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I have two breakfast options, oatmeal or X bar. That's it. If outside of that, I lose it. So here's what I've been thinking. Leadership through this change is going to be critical if human beings want to succeed. And I'm saying that on a macro and a micro level. So what components of leadership do we think may be most critical? First, I think it's consistency. In a world of mind-blowing change, as a leader, being consistent is important, but what can you say consistent on? Values and mission. As a leader, it is key for you to always come back to values as an organization in the face of this disruptive change. That is going to give your organization the stability and the focus that it needs. I also think that communication is going to be really important. Okay. Communication that is grounded in a shared and common humanity and compassion. I know people have been saying, guys, look, your jobs are going to change, but you're going to have a job, AI disruption. It's all about how you use these tools. Look, I grew up in coal country in Appalachia, in West Virginia. And in the 20th century, that's what they told everybody, okay? They told the coal miners and everyone associated to the industry, don't worry, y'all. There's going to be industries to come in to replace coal. Guess what hasn't happened in 75 years, Jason? Nothing.
Yeah, right.
And so there is an opportunity for our economy to transform and to have wealth and prosperity for all. But that is going to take effort and regulation. And so I think as leaders of an organization, we will end up making very difficult decisions that may put business over individual people. Okay. I do think this is going to happen. I do think this transition will take away jobs. And as leaders, I feel it is our responsibility to not sugarcoat that or to ignore it or even to lie about it. which is what I've seen happen. And so I think when those moments come, when you are a leader, it is imperative to be as transparent as you can, because that is rooted in compassion. The last thing I'll say about this is people aren't stupid. Like the people that work with you on your teams, they can smell BS.
Right.
You know, people are really good at this. And so I think that as leaders, we need to be kind by being truthful. And oftentimes that's delivering hard messages that it's going to hurt people to hear.
I wonder, I completely agree with the notion that transparency and honest conversation is going to be the best policy. Given the access challenges that we have, shortages in clinicians that we have in the United States, is there a world in which many of these roles are not simply transitioned, but can be transitioned in some way where access is enhanced either through improved efficiency, better or different use of teleservices, some type of extra layer where technology filters and raises the acuity levels or raises the need for review of acuity levels to the appropriate professional that actually helps to alleviate some of the shortage problem that we have, right? Can technology be a solution that takes the base that we have of both providers and team members, right? Clinical, allied health, and what previously we've been calling back office, but perhaps should be called core office team members, and allows better access and allows all of those patients, members, friends, families, our mothers and brothers and sisters that need care to actually receive it.
I do. I absolutely do. And this is our great opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we'll be right back after this message, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how do we make sure that we get the right audience and touch on the right audience for System Logic Podcast. We'll be right back with Allison. So we're back with Allison. We've been talking a little bit about technology, how it's impacted the industry that we both have been in and love for the last entirety of our careers. Well, I want to pivot a little bit. I want to pick your brain as a target audience member, as a healthcare leader and healthcare professional out there. I want to make sure that the System Logic Podcast is speaking to folks like you. We are sitting at the intersection of healthcare and technology. What are the types of guests? Who are the types of folks that you would love to see us have on the podcast to get their perspectives?
Great question. I would love to hear from people that think about problems differently than I do. When I choose podcasts, I am typically going into the conversation wanting to understand a perspective that I haven't considered. And so I would encourage you to think about guests that either have really unique life experiences or they are in different corners of the healthcare ecosystem that could inform people's work. The other interesting thing you may want to consider, Jason, is having some guests that aren't in our industry at all. It may be helpful. I've always found it helpful to get an outsider's perspective when I've been chewing on a problem, ruminating on a problem for a long time.
Of course.
And so it could be really interesting to get somebody in here who has great leadership experience. They're an operator in another industry, and maybe they have some lessons for us in healthcare.
Yeah. No, I love that idea, and I think you're right. There are a ton of elements that, especially as it comes from AI or other technologies, where other industries are far ahead of us in healthcare, and some of those applications could be directly relatable. So I love that.
Totally.
I've been thinking also a little bit about trying to get folks on, obviously from technology companies, obviously from health system positions, perhaps health plan perspective as well. They're certainly part of the equation. And perhaps even see if we can get a regulator or a politician or somebody that's from a legislative perspective thinking about how do we legislate, how do we regulate healthcare, and what are some of the things that go into that calculation.
Fascinating. I think that's a great idea. And policy, while it is slow moving, to say the least, can be hugely impactful in our industry, clearly. So better understanding the political and legislative landscape, I think, could be quite fascinating for your listenership.
Okay. And so the other thing that I was thinking about was how do we, obviously have different conversations? How do we, get at the core of what many of the listeners might be interested in? So, as you're sitting in the car or taking walking your dog and listening to a conversation with a, CEO of a healthcare technology company or the chief operating officer of a regional health plan or similarly, or maybe we have a House of Representatives person on the line. What are some of the questions that come to mind that you would love for me to dive into with guests like those?
I would love for you to ask them how they personally would disrupt healthcare, like what they think is okay. So I have kids. I have a daughter. She's got very long hair. When she goes to camp or on an overnight, she can come back with some pretty big knots, right? And so, what do I do to help her brush her hair? I don't run the brush through her hair like all of it at once. You can't do that. You have to take it section by section. And because of healthcare, I think it's a great analogy to healthcare. It is very complex. It is full of all different kinds of interconnected systems. And so we have to take it one tangle at a time. And so I would love for you to ask your
Mom
guests.
wisdom. I love it.
Mom wisdom. Yes. Girl mom wisdom.
There you go.
I would love for you to ask your guests what section of healthcare they think they could untangle, or what is most important for us
Yeah.
from from an order of operations perspective. What should we first untangle? I also would. I think my light bulb moments in my life, both personal and professional, come from me failing. Really bad failure. And I would love for you to ask your guests what they've learned in moments of failure. Because I think that's we were talking about growth mindset earlier in the podcast. I think it's where we're growing the most is when we've been knocked down on the floor, perhaps we're bleeding, broken bones. What are those key takeaways that they learned in those moments?
Yeah, that can be incredibly educating. Folks can, learn some of that School of Hard Knocks lessons from folks that have been there and adopt it and incorporate it into their own life and process and help perhaps get through some of those little tangles as they go. I would say though that as you told that analogy, what sometimes I hear in the marketplace is, well, healthcare is so complicated that it's a systemic issue, and how can solving one little tangle get the brush all the way through the hair, to continue your analogy? And I wonder what you might say to somebody that has that rebuttal.
I would say you're two things. One is you're not thinking creatively enough. If we have created this system, we can, I don't want to say dismantle it, but we can change it. This is not an irreversible problem we have. Yes, it's tremendously complex. Yes, it's interconnected. But I don't look at my daughter's hair and I'm like, well, I guess you're never having brushed hair again.
Right.
Does it take me 45 minutes? It could, but I do it. And so I think we all have to approach this and say, look, this is a big problem. There are a lot of interconnected problems. Let's work together to work towards a solution. Might it take us 25 years? It could.
Yeah.
And I think there's a mixture of market change and policy change and systems change. There's change that we have to make across the industry.
Fair points all. Well, so what's next for you? Near term, medium term, what are you hoping to tackle in the rest of this year and beyond?
I'm taking some time off. After I stepped away from ECG in January, I am taking time to really work on myself. And figure out what's next for me. How do I want to spend this one wild, precious life that I have? I know I want to have impact. I know I want to disrupt. And I know I want to do it with people that I have fun with. So I'm just enjoying the time off right now, thinking through potential opportunities for myself. And I think, stay tuned to see what's next.
Fantastic. And I know you spent a lot of time in provider compensation, physician compensation stuff. Do you think your future might touch on that a little bit, or still hard to tell whether or not you use some of that wisdom and continue to untangle the tangled web that is physician compensation?
I never want to say never. I am interested though in I still love the provider landscape. Clinicians are really at the heart of healthcare. I want to think about different problems though. I want to look at this from a fresh angle. I will absolutely use the lessons that I learned in this niche, and I've met many tremendously amazing people, yourself included, on my 2-decade journey, but I think there's, I don't know what it is yet, but I think there's something out there for me that I have to discover. And it may be quite different from the problems that I've been working on for the past 20 years.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Allison, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here at System Logic Podcast. Thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate looking forward to future conversations with you.
Thank you, Jason. It was a pleasure.
Well, so that's another episode of the System Logic Podcast. I want to thank Allison Pullins for joining me here. Talked a little bit about technology, the career journey, and some of the challenges that the healthcare industry is going to be facing over the next several years. So between that and learning a little bit more about what you out there would love to be listening to, I really appreciate Allison for joining me today. So if you want to hear more conversations like this, please subscribe to the System Logic Podcast, and we will see you out there on all of the socials. See you next time.